I just want to share these like really exciting stories. And I'm a book lover. I love to read and I'm always hungry for something else, something new, something thrilling. So writing does give me that. It's okay to write a crappy first draft. The first draft is putting sand in the sandbox and the second one is building the castle, but you need something in there first. Once we knew what the premise was and we had kind of like the outline going, that's when I try and really find the worst possible personality to deal with this situation. The whole deal about writing is that time on task really is the best teacher.
Welcome to 10 Hat Media. Today, I'm excited to introduce our conversation with Raquel Byrnes, the mind behind memory bank thrillers. Raquel's work is praised for its intelligent characters and immersive worlds. In our chat, we explored her research process, discussing the challenges of finding accurate details, the surprising turns her characters have taken, and her creative methods for tracking multiple story worlds. Raquel also opened up about balancing life as a mom of 6 with her passion for writing. And yes, she's not shy about geeking out over the sci-fi genre. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another interview. I am so excited to have a special guest with us. Raquel Byrnes is joining us this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you may be. Thank you so much, Raquel, for sitting down with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to jump right into it. Your books span multiple genres, and including thriller, suspense, gothic mysteries, and like a steampunk sci-fi, which I am obsessed with. How do you approach research when working on such varied themes and worlds?
I think one of the first things I do is set myself parameters because I could go down some rabbit holes that chew up a lot of time. So what I do is normally I'll start with like genre specific. So like, for instance, in like, if I were to be writing a gothic, I need to know what the readers expect as common tropes within that genre. For instance, it needs to be isolated. There needs to be, mysterious characters. For things like the memory bank, where it's techno thrillers, I need to know like the pace and things like that. So I start out with researching genre, make sure I totally have it down, and then I set it to time and place. So again, because I tend to write in time periods because it's techno thrillers. So for the memory bank series, I kind of had to like figure out, okay, like what's in this time period? How far out do I think technology has extrapolated in that time frame? The location, which is Seattle, kind of understanding the culture of it and the tone and feel of it. So, because it's different than say Silicon Valley. It's
Right.
going to be very different accents and things that are there. So I try and kind of give myself some parameters so I'm not just, oh, I'm this and oh, and this and oh, and that. And because that just takes up too much time. And then I try and cram it all in the book because, I did the research. So
Spend so much time. You have to get paid back for your efforts of that.
Oh, yeah, totally.
When it comes to the memory bank, was any of your research geared towards like what people are expecting tech to look like in the future? Or was a lot of it kind of like your own imagination and like fiction, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think it's kind of stacked. So what I do is I spend a lot of time in like futurism forums and I follow a lot of thought leaders, periodicals and newsletters, and I watch a lot of the consortiums that they have and things. So I'm kind of immersed in the tech. And so I kind of have an idea of what they're saying is coming next, what their concepts, the things they show is what's coming down the pike and things like that. And then I add to that, I extrapolate out like with imagination, like where can we go with that? What can we use that? And how can that go horribly wrong? So, those are the things that I consider when I'm trying to kind of find a starting point.
Yeah, speaking of that starting point, when you're starting your research and beginning to write your story, do you outline your story before your research, or do you kind of dive deeper as you're writing, or maybe both?
I kind of have a lot of research on the front end because I need to develop technology or a situation that hasn't occurred yet.
Right.
And so I do need to kind of really understand the mechanisms behind that. I listen to a lot of ethicists because they're the canaries in the, mind going like, this might be a problem. This might be a problem. And then you get like, I think it was Michael Crichton had said that it's almost like a pearl where like it starts to coat and before you know it, you've got something. So once I have like a concept or a premise, then I'll develop an outline. And usually while I'm writing the outline, that's when I'm like, wow, I really don't understand that all the way. Got to research that, like, wow, I really need to know, like, can you do that in Seattle? Like, so like usually the outline helps to kind of outline, like, you don't know this, so you need to research this. So that gives me a lot more of a focus direction. So it is kind of both, I guess, but most of it's on the front end. And then about halfway through my outline, I'll make sure that I have the tech really explained. And so sometimes I might have to do a little bit more like interaction or calling someone or, saying, hey, can you explain this like for a lay person for me? And it usually helps, like clog the block. Usually that's when I start to slow down. I'm like, oh, I gotta add more here. So it seems to be that I research continually.
I think that's the best path too,
Yeah.
is to constantly be learning, even when you're not writing, maybe.
Yeah.
It's just always in the back of the brain. So then, like, because you're researching so much and because you've researched so many different topics, what do you think has been like the most challenging aspect of research? Like, have you ever struggled to find maybe accurate or detailed enough information about a topic?
Yeah, a lot of times, again, because I tend to write in future tech or weaponry or military things, I don't have access to top secret stuff, nor should I be talking about it. But I actually spend a lot of time in like military forums, like they show off the equipment. And I grew up as a military brat. And so I love, helicopters and all of those things. So I find that sometimes it's difficult to find easily readable things. So I could get research papers, but I need to like be able to have it just distilled down a bit. And a lot of the people who write these papers, they actually do that for publication. So you can track down kind of like a more easier way to explain it to the average person, as opposed to talking all science-ese. Because I feel like that would throw off the reader. It would throw me off if I had to like look up stuff that while I'm reading a book, So I want to make sure it's crystal clear. And a lot of times there's just not a lot of information on what I'm trying to write about because it hasn't happened yet. So there have been times when I was doing a short story that included pheromones, and I ended up having to call the entomology department of the local university and chatting with a professor who was so stoked someone wanted to know about it. So usually finding people that love what you're researching, they will make it exciting for you as well because they're so passionate about it. So.
And they're probably just excited that anybody's asking about it.
They really are. They're like, he's like, really? You want to know? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay.
You kind of mentioned like research papers and things like that, but are there any specific books, documentaries, or like resources that have been like especially helpful to during this time? Or you mentioned podcasts earlier too.
I find that there are a lot of like science content creators that not only explain things really, really well, but they point you to resources that can take you deeper and help you fully understand. I spend a lot of time, like I said, in like forums where people are just, it's a more casual discussion of, yeah, but what about this? Or I heard this. And it actually is like almost listening in on a conversation with a couple people who are like, say, engineers or material scientists or whatever. You can ask them questions directly and they, again, will be like, oh, well, technically, and they'll write you like a couple paragraphs. So it's really nice. And I spend a lot of times listening to podcasts. There's a lot of them will give talks and things like that. And I'm there with my little, taking notes. It's a lot of research, which is my favorite part of writing.
In like on the story side of this, because you have all this research and of course you have to apply it to your own fiction and your own plot, the characters then must become such interesting people after you've done all this research and you've met all these interesting people and talked to all these interesting people. Which of your characters has surprised you maybe the most when you've been during the writing process? I know that authors sometimes say that like a character comes out of nowhere, even though I know that it's in your brain. Has that ever happened for you?
Yeah, actually, this recent series that I'm doing with Brian Shea of the Memory Bank, he and we collaborated on, like we were throwing together like ideas for characters and stuff. Once we knew what the premise was and we had kind of like the outline going, that's when I try and really find the worst possible personality to deal with this situation. So they have to have the correct skills and proximities. They have to be in law enforcement if it's like a crime thriller or whatever. But for instance, the main character of the Memory Bank series, his mother was an artist. He enjoys all the tactile, the notebooks and the paint, and he's very observant of things like that. Really distrusts technology. So he was really kind of an interesting thing to kind of construct. He was a fun build, but the surprising character actually was his partner, which is the secondary character. Her name is Nat, and she was a new detective at the time. And she just comes out of the gate, like just a spitfire. She doesn't like that he's not following the rules, you know. And then you find that she settles in and she loves technology, which was one of the major sources of friction. She would like print stuff out for him, like, cause he's old or whatever, you know, and, they actually help each other to be like more centered. But she was quite a surprise, and she's very sarcastic and very blunt. She'll say things and he's like, oh, let's keep that to ourselves. And she was really fun because we spent so much time on Reed, the main character. To see her emerge while we're writing her was really fun.
That sounds so beautiful. I mean, I love when things surprise you, even if it's coming out of your own brain. Their dynamic just sounds so fun. I love that kind of character types where they hate each other, but also it's like a hate-love relationship.
Yeah, it's kind of like an odd couple.
You're on your third book now of Memory Bank.
Actually. The third one just came out, and the fourth one, we're more than halfway through. It's chugging along pretty good. You
talk about Nat and Reed so lovingly. So what is your favorite part of like developing characters across multiple books?
When it's in a series, you get to reveal so much more of what made them who they are. For Reed, in the first book, you meet him. He's this kind of goth adjacent, kind of intellectual, darker, you know, person. And then you start to meet people that are from his past that shed light on this kind of wild aspect that you didn't realize, maybe a little bit unlawfulness. And then in the next book, you really, you know, that comes to the forefront because it's from his world. So I got to bring more of who he was and why he's the way he is. And I just feel like the more you reveal about the character, the more you feel like you know them. As a reader, I love knowing all of like the little bits and historical fun fact. He did this when he was 12 or whatever. So I love that as a reader to learn about main characters more, even if it doesn't have to do with the story. It does inform the way they are and their decisions. So I think a series allows for that much more than like a one-off book.
Absolutely. More detail is always better too.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of all of those like little facts or personalities after so many books? Like, do you have maybe a master book, or is it just all up here?
I took a lot of like writing classes stuff. And one of the things that I picked up was something called a style sheet. It was from an editor, and it's like a document that's a grid, and it has like characters, places, any kind of new name you've made up, especially when I write, it's like, you know, I'm like, did I hyphenate that? Is it Agrabot or Agrabot with a hyphen? You know, like, and you have to remember all of these things. And also kind of like the world's rules. I put in things like character quirks, common gestures. For instance, Nat, she has a more colloquial way of talking. So she says like gotta and gonna and wanna, but Reed does not. And so my hope is that when you open up a chapter and you start reading dialogue, you know who it is by the way that they're talking. I try and keep like track of all this, especially because otherwise I'll have to go back to like the first book and go, how did I spell that if I don't have it like on a list? I have multiple screens, and so I have multiple documents open. I have a chapter by chapter, which kind of keeps me on track. I can see in a glance where I'm at, what time of day it's supposed to be. Because when I was a first writer, they'd go into a building and come out and it's like midnight. My husband's like, they went in at like lunch. Like, where did this come on?
It's 12 hours in a building.
Yeah, it kind of helps me keep the plate spinning in a more organized manner.
Speaking of that, not only are you a writer, but you're also a mom of 6 with huskies, I've heard. I've heard about the beautiful huskies.
My babies.
How do you carve out time for writing and all your researching for your novels? Like, do you have routines or maybe strategies that you've developed?
Yeah, when I first started writing, I homeschooled them through, you know, well, they went to college, but you know, like I homeschooled them all through high school. And so my original blogger name was Night Writer, because like after they went to bed and the house was quiet, that's when I would do the research, write out my chapters. During the day while I was like homeschooling and stuff, I'd be jotting down like notes or like a little vignette, like, oh, I need to get this scene in there, or, oh, don't forget to do this. But like sitting and writing at night was my routine until I'd say about 2 or 3 years ago, when my youngest, they hit like juniors in high school, and they're like, we got this, because it's all, computered and everything. And they have like live classes and things like that and stuff that they do outside of the house. And so I actually have a lot more time to write now. And one of the things that my husband did for me that was amazing was he guarded my writing time. So he would sometimes be like goalie at the door, like, don't come in, she's writing. Like, don't ask me. Nope. Go make a sandwich, so he was really helpful. It was kind of like a team effort with my family.
Mom's working, go away.
Yeah. Whatever. As for the Huskies,
writing sign instead of like a John fishing sign.
Yeah. As for the Huskies, they are always needing something. They're actually being babysat right now by my oldest son, because you would see him like popping up asking me to take them out.
Listen, we love when they're needy because it means that they love us.
I know. It means they love you.
So then when life gets hectic or when things are happening, how do you keep motivated to write? I know you said that your husband helps out and that, but are there any things that you do to help? Like, I still need to do these words. I still need to get this done. This edit has to happen. Things like that.
I think deadlines are pretty effective at motivating me. I need to. So sit down and start typing. Before I was published, when you write on spec, where you like write a book and then you give it to your agent and hope that they can place it. I love writing. I wrote in high school when I was supposed to be taking notes in biology. I wrote, on the bus. So like I was doing it anyway. Did it for free for years until I got a book deal. So I think the motivation for me is that I just want to share these like really exciting stories. And I'm a book lover. I love to read, and I'm always hungry for something else, something new, something thrilling. So writing does give me that, because even though I'm making it up as I go along, it's still a fun ride.
Well, similar to your love of reading, this is kind of going a different path now. I've heard that you're a really big fan of sci-fi movies, and specifically you love Firefly, which I love Firefly.
Yeah.
So I'm on the same page as you. How has your love of like sci-fi movies and shows influenced your storytelling and creative process? I know that you've written sci-fi before, but does that bleed into Memory Bank at all, or into your writing as a whole?
The spirit of sci-fi tends to be like A, cautionary, and B, hopeful. And I just feel like when I take that into writing, regardless of what I write, it's going to be filled with that wonder, that kind of nobility of man, the thrill, the high stakes, and things like that. And again, sci-fi tends to be kind of a canary in the mind, saying like, hey, look at this. This could be a problem, or this is something we could do, or this is like, what we're capable of. So I think that sci-fi is just really hopeful. It's thrilling. I hope to bring that to like all the kinds of books that I write.
Well, we're kind of winding down. I just have one more question for you, and I think it's like the age-old question for all authors. But we always love to hear, what's one piece of writing advice that you'd wish you'd received when you first started?
There's a saying, kill your darlings, but I think you have to be like brutal. Like, it was very difficult for me to spend a very long time polishing this chapter that was amazing and then have feedback that's like, it's beautiful, does not move the story forward, does not reveal character. It doesn't serve the book. And I can't tell you how many times I turn stuff into like contests or whatever, and they're like, slash the first 3 chapters. It's like, have to learn to be kind of brutal with yourself, like an editor would be. Like, I would hope an editor would be kind of like very like, this is the best way, like shaving off the fat of it. And I think if someone had told me, I would have been more willing to kind of rip out things and try and redo them if it wasn't in my head that like, it's been, time on task doesn't mean it's great. It just means you spend a lot of time on it. So I would really hope that would be one. And also, someone once told me that it's okay to write a crappy first draft. The first draft is putting sand in the sandbox, and the second one is building the castle. But you need something in there first. And that would have, I think, helped a lot of my colleagues when we were in like critique groups and stuff, because you get stuck with like making the first few totally perfect, and you kind of like, the whole deal about writing is that time on task really is the best teacher. Like you have to write books to learn how to write books. It's kind of like a learn as you go process. And you could take classes and things like that, but really you have to, like, what is my voice? Like, what is the cadence that I write? How quickly can I do it? What is the pace? What is the tone? And when you learn all of those things, I think that makes it easier to write. I wish someone had told me as a young person, like, just write. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to sound like, don't write to market. Just write.
With that, we're going to go ahead and let you go for the day. But thank you so much, Raquel, for joining us this afternoon. This has been a blast. I have so enjoyed hearing about your process.
Yeah, a great time too. Thank you for having me.